All right, so at this point, we have looked at how scientists reason with evidence, and we've also looked at a little bit of the characteristics of sunlight. Now, as we continue our journey to try to figure out exactly what is going on in an atom, we're going to take a look at the work of a few people. Specifically, we're going to look at Niels Bohr. But prior to Niels Bohr, there was information about the atom that came to light. We're not going to go through the steps to bring about that information, but it was known that there were protons in an atom and that there were neutrons in an atom and that there were electrons, and you can see the charges of positive, neutral, and negative. And this information was known, but no models of the atom were actually developed that match the evidence. And remember, that's key. If you go back to what we were doing earlier with the tube, you could have drawn anything, but the model you made was meant to match what you knew. And none of the models actually match the evidence known about the structure of the atom. Niels Bohr, a Danish physicist, he came along and he looked at the information, and he developed a model that involved light and energy. There was certainly work from other people, but his model is based on this idea of light and energy. So let's work through this and take a look at some of the aspects of that. So if we look at this model here, this is just representing essentially what we looked at outside with the glass of water. This could represent the sun. Granted, a white light bulb or a sun would be the same, really. But in a controlled situation, we could take that sunlight and beam it down into a prism. I use the water as a prism. And from there, from that point, we could actually get a whole bunch of different colors. We could get that rainbow. It's split up into different colors like red. Oh, my arrow's backwards. There we go. And oranges. Right there, and then we have our yellows that are coming about, and they're coming up right here. Green. Oh, moving my yellow. There's our green. And now, this particular model doesn't necessarily take into account all the colors specifically, as you maybe remember Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. This simplifies that just a little bit. And there they are. Those are our color spectrum right there. And notice a few things about this table here. First, we might as well start with speed. All of these things are light, and not surprisingly, they travel at the speed of light. They all have the exact same speed. Okay? And so that actually isn't going to play a part in what we're doing. Another thing to notice is here in wavelength, that there is a range of wavelengths. For example, the reds, and notice that is plural, the reds are anywhere from 625 nanometers, that's what the NM is, to 740 nanometers. It's that whole range. So within this spectrum of red right here, can't quite see my pen here, but right in this area, those are the different wavelengths. And the same goes for all our oranges and our yellows and our greens and our blues and indigos and violets. All the way down, they have a range that fill in the entire spectrum of the rainbow that we're used to seeing. Now, the next part of this is that each of these different colors of light have associated with them a different amount of energy. So the wavelength represents or correlates to the color, and also you can see there is a range of energy that goes along with it. For the reds, it's anywhere from 269 to 318, 10 to the negative 21st joules. I know it gets a little tricky there, but it is amount of energy. And then it goes down here. So there's all sorts of things you could notice here is which have the most energy, and that would be these down here. Violets have the most energy, which have the least amount of energy associated with the different wavelengths, and that would be our reds up here. And so the two things to take away as we look at this is that light in light, we have colors, which are equal to wavelengths. Wavelengths. And then also the fact that different wavelengths of light, different wavelengths have different amounts of energy associated with them. We'll just write different energy. Okay? So as we go forward here, so this is white light. This is what we saw on my patio there. But what would happen if we just took one element, one specific element, and looked at that? And what Niels Bohr looked at, and others, was hydrogen. He looked at specifically the element hydrogen. And now it looks a little bit different here, but in fact what you're seeing is very similar to what was seen in the last one. Over here, this particular device, it's just a little device that creates an electrical current that then goes through a gas in a tube and it glows, just like a neon light you see on the street, except in this case it's a hydrogen light. And then it goes through this little slit to focus it, and then through a prism. And what was noticed is that in the case of hydrogen, the prism shot out 4 different colors that could be seen. There was a red, there's a green hidden in there, there's a blue right there, and there was a purple or a violet. Not really purple, a violet. And they all had very specific wavelengths. And here are the wavelengths down here. Now, if we go back for a second, we think, okay, there's different colors and different wavelengths, and that means different amounts of energy associated with those. Remember, different wavelengths equals different energy. And all in here, all in the middle, is just blank. There's nothing in between these lines. There's no wavelengths of light coming through. Whereas in the continuous spectrum we saw on the previous page, there was light all the way across. Here it's just empty because no energy is actually emitted, which means that only specific amounts of energy in the form of light were given off, and there they are. So Niels Bohr takes this information and he thinks, okay, so we have a central location, a center, a nucleus of an atom, and around it somehow are the electrons out in this area. People before him said they were just sort of there in a cloud, and he came up with an idea that was a little bit different than that. To understand Niels Bohr's atom, we can look at this. He said that electrons are in specific energy levels. Now that's a pretty big jump, and for most people they would actually say, yeah, that makes sense to me, it's what I learned. But you have to remember, put yourself in Niels Bohr's perspective. Nobody had ever thought of this. This was brand new. And so what he thought is this is how it worked. And he had to account for, remember, we're using our evidence, he had to account for those wavelengths of light that he was seeing in that hydrogen emission spectrum. And so here's what is essentially going on in this. As energy is brought in, so we bring energy into an atom, electrons get excited, and he said they jump to a higher energy level. In this case, it goes from the 2nd energy level to the 5th energy level, but that requires an input of energy. That is a very short-term state right there. Okay? And we can look here to see what happens right away. So after the energy comes in the atom over here on the left, it immediately is emitted, and it is emitted as light. Okay, so energy comes in whatever form, in electricity as that electrical current runs through the hydrogen, and then it gets emitted as light, and light of a specific wavelength. And remember, that was important. That light of a specific wavelength is going to correlate to a very specific amount of energy. And you could have various jumps. Remember, these electrons are just moving. So they could go from the second energy level to the third energy level and then fall back down. Or they could go from the second to the fourth and fall back down. Or the one we have, which is the second to the fifth and fall back down. Or the second to the sixth and fall back down. So Niels Bohr's model actually accounts for that bright line spectrum we saw over here. It accounts for the fact that there are specific wavelengths of energy. Those correlate or match up to specific jumps from the second energy level to the sixth, then falling back down, and on and on and on. It actually turns out that you go beyond those 4 wavelengths for hydrogen. There's just some that are outside of our visible spectrum, sort of into the infrareds and ultraviolets beyond what our eyes can pick up. But they can be detected with other means. And so that's where we get to at the end of this, is that we looked at taking models and using them to make sense of evidence, and then testing them. We did that with the tube. And then we looked at how scientists looked at the worlds around them. We looked at the fact that that light can be seen, and we can go ahead and we can see colors in that, the rainbow, the spectrum, and link those to different properties like wavelength and energy. So that gets related to that. And then this is the new thing, that Niels Bohr comes along and he creates what's called, well, it wasn't called at the time, obviously, the Bohr model of the atom. Okay? This made sense of the information that was known. So much like that last tube, is this model correct? Well, much like you walked away not necessarily knowing if your model was correct, Niels Bohr didn't know that either. It turned out it wasn't 100% correct, but it was another step in the right direction. And since then, since our technology has improved and since people have studied this fairly in depth, we've learned more and more about the structure of the atom. And from that, we keep piecing together the world around us, whether it's small like the atom or as big as the Big Bang. Hopefully you've enjoyed this lecture, and if you have any questions, please feel free to leave comments below.